Yo, I thought we were done. We made a couple videos already on this topic, and the news keeps on coming. The rumor mill keeps churning. James Harden might be out of Houston. So the reason we're saying this is because he failed to report to training camp, both training camp and individual workouts. He did not show up, which is giving us more credence to the rumors that he might be on his way out again. But before we jump right into our possible landing spots, let me tell you guys about an awesome thing that we have got going on. We have gotten an affiliation with Audible, the audiobook streaming service. We're actually on Audible ourselves as a podcast, so you could go listen to us on there. But if you use the link in our description below, you will get 30 days free of Audible, and it'll be helping out the channel too. We earn a little bit of the commission so that we can be using that to grow and do some awesome events. For example, we got a Audible affiliated holiday giveaway going on our social media. So go check out our Instagram, our Twitter, all of our social medias. We got links posted everywhere for instructions of what you need to do to enter a holiday giveaway to earn a free NBA t-shirt of your choice, whatever team you want, team logo shirt. And all you have to do is go on our social media and follow the instructions. And that is also affiliated with Audible. So that's just a little plug I wanted to do before we started. But Houston Rockets, they got something big on their hands right now because James Harden's making it abundantly clear he'd rather go to the club than show up for practice. So is that him forcing a move out? And if it is, where do you guys think he might go?
Well, when it comes in terms of James Harden, we've been covering this speculation since October 1st, really, and we've had teams like Brooklyn and Philadelphia in our eyes early on, but now Brooklyn's looking more unlikely, and Philadelphia might not be willing to make the move for James Harden to pair with Joel Embiid. So we're going to be giving you guys a little more in-depth scenarios of potentially some other teams that could make a move for James Harden if Houston decides to elect to trade him, because that's the biggest what if in this scenario. When we were talking, we were looking at teams that could be cool. You know, the reuniting with Oklahoma City was a possibility, but we just couldn't make the Caps match up. You know, Boston, Chicago, New Orleans, but we couldn't make the Caps match up. So there's a lot of teams out there that definitely have interest in a superstar like James Harden, and we're going to give you guys some in-depth breakdowns. So let's start off with the first one, which is probably one of my favorite packages, the Sacramento Kings, who have a lot of young assets and contracts that they can ship out for a player like James Harden, and are looking more likely to me as one of the favorite teams that can offer Houston the best package for the future. What are your thoughts on the Kings potentially sending Buddy Hield, Marvin Bagley, Jabari Parker, and Bielitsa to the Houston Rockets for James Harden?
Yeah, that would be an interesting deal. They would be kind of loaded up in their backcourt. They would have De'Aaron Fox, who they just draft. I'm blanking right
Tyrese
now.
Halliburton.
Tyrese Halliburton, that's right, and James Harden, all in that backcourt. Probably Halliburton would be coming off the bench in this scenario. Give him some room to develop and grow. But I think that's a pretty interesting offer. I think Houston would definitely have to take a second look at that if it gets offered to them on the phone, because every team around the league is calling the Rockets, asking about what the price for James Harden looks like right now.
Yeah, what do you think, Brandon?
If you take a look at the Houston needs and we look at that Kings package, we talked about Hield, Bagley, Parker, and Bielitsa be a part of it. Their team is still very much D'Antoni-like in the sense of they have a lot of guards on their team, but not a lot of forward depth. Obviously, you'll be adding Hield, to replace James Harden, but adding guys like Bagley, Parker, and Bielitsa, I feel like that would be kind of a step up. They added Christian Wood in the offseason, which is great.
And DeMarcus Cousins.
So that's two big guys right there. And now you're adding Bagley, who's honestly, I think when healthy, is probably one of the best young talents we have in the NBA. You're adding Jabari Parker, who is a seasoned veteran, and Bielitsa, who's another stretch four. So if you want to kind of move away from D'Antoni's system, and you will still have guys like PJ Tucker and and Daniel House to still like
Yep.
be your forward. So that, I mean, to have a good rotation of all of those, I feel like that's a good team to coach and be and play around. I mean, again, they can go small again and go Eric Gordon at the 3, like we've seen.
Yeah, they got a lot of really good options if they do that. And obviously,
Yeah.
on Sacramento's end of things, they'd love to finally have a star player ever since DeMarcus Cousins left. And wouldn't that be fun if the team that acquired DeMarcus Cousins ended up trading for all of these assets from the Kings in return for James Harden?
I mean, it's an interesting thing, and I feel like Sacramento would also, on top of this, like we say, how good this package is. I mean, the same thing with all these teams would have to be giving up picks as well, and then you would have
there's something to sweeten the pot a little bit for a superstar player.
And then if you look at how Sacramento would be affected by this, they would still have Harrison Barnes. You would have De'Aaron Fox, which I think honestly a fast break with Harden and De'Aaron Fox might be a little scary. They picked up Hassan Whiteside. You still have Rashard Holmes. You would probably. I mean, they signed Frank Kaminsky to an Exhibit 10 contract. I mean, you would.
They could be pushing for playoffs with that team.
I mean, they could. I still feel like they also have Glenn Robinson III. I still feel like they would be getting up a lot of forward depth that they already have to make this trade work because Houston's loaded up on guards, and so that's why we're struggling to find with some of the teams.
But
New Orleans, but I feel like they'll be able to maybe add in a third team to maybe acquire a few more forwards, so that way they can balance this trade out.
Yeah, but again, we're only doing one team at a time here.
Right,
So you guys want to move on. This is, I think, maybe a dark horse team because they're already so great. So maybe they don't want to blow up their roster. But this is also the kind of team that's very opportunistic. And if they see the opportunity to do this, they're going to jump on it. I mean, we've seen them throw around trade rumors all the time. So I'm just going to say who we are.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Danny Ainge, that's a spoiler alert.
But like the last time like a big trade they executed was probably the one to Brooklyn where it pretty much gave them all those picks. And
the team that we're talking about is the Boston Celtics.
Yeah. So let me break down this trade offer that we concocted here at the Backseat Banter Labs. It would be Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Daniel Tice, Robert Williams, and potentially some picks for James Harden. Now, Boston has a very easy path here because unlike a lot of these other teams, they do not have to worry about matching contracts because that Gordon Hayward deal gave them a $28.5 million trade exception, which means they could trade for a max level player without giving out max level contract in return. And Jaylen Brown might be the best player on the move out of all of these trades that we are going to discuss to be given in return. So if Houston wants to compete, which it seems like they do because they did trade for John Wall, which is a big contract. So they would hope that he's able to come back healthy. They did make some big moves assigning Christian Wood in the offseason. So if they want to compete, Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart might be the duo that will help them do that the most. Although we do have another really cool trade for you guys to think about a little bit later in this video that could also help them compete right now.
Right. I mean, how this affects Boston, it's pretty much they're giving up a lot of their, I guess, role players in depth to get a superstar. And that was something we keep seeing from Danny Ainge over and over again. Like, I don't know, like even the Kyrie deal, like they were still able to get back some rotational pieces from that deal. So I don't see how.
Wait, did you say earlier that the Celtics never got a trade and then they traded for Kyrie?
I mean, it's a 130. I forgot.
It's all good.
But how this impacts Boston is now you have Kemba and Harden, which is going to be an interesting duo. How they work that out in terms of who handles the ball, because these are two ball dominant guards that you're asking to share the ball with. Obviously, you still have Jason Tatum, probably being really good. And then
I'm looking at that lineup actually a little bit. They just signed Tristan Thompson this offseason, so they do actually have some decent center value going into the season. You pair a core of Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, and James Harden in the modern day NBA,
Mhm.
and you are looking at probably the scariest team, the Warriors 2.0, if you want to call it, with
I mean,
Right.
bootleg Steph with James Harden. I mean, you
I
don't
mean,
get the
they
shooting, the
also
Splash Bros, but you definitely do get a KD younger version with Jason Tatum. So it would remind me of kind of the quote unquote death lineup where you have an elite superstar
right.
scorer, some good shooting around him, and then another elite superstar
it'd be a
scorer.
very,
Yeah.
very bootleg version
And
of that.
what
And the
I
reason I included the varies is because the Splash Bros were so unselfish. They were so happy passing the ball up and playing off ball, whereas this team is very ball dominant. But if they all bought into the system, they could definitely make that happen.
I
Any
mean,
last words on Boston
yeah,
before we move on?
yeah. I mean, really quickly. I mean, it's also going to be very scary shooting lineup because I mean, they have Romeo Langford, they have Aaron
Mhm.
Naismith, Grant Williams could step out there. I mean, they've also picked up Jeff Teague in the offseason.
Mhm.
So I really feel like this is a move that if it happens, I think honestly we might talk about Boston being a secure lock for not just the Eastern Conference Finals, but possibly the
Mhm.
finals.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
could contest the Lakers for sure with
they'd
a
be a
lineup like
favorite.
that.
Team could contest the Lakers. And it would probably also force Boston to start playing Taco Fall a little bit more, which I think we're all gonna win from.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, so let's move on. We got Chicago as a possible dark horse option potentially, because they do have some assets and some contracts to make the money work. So it would be Otto Porter with that giant $28 million deal that he's got going on, Laurie Markkinen, Kobe White, and potentially some picks as well, because we do know that Chicago has some picks. So they really would be emptying their stash. Their lineup would be James Harden, Zach LaVine. They sell Wendell Carter Jr., right?
Yeah,
Yep.
it'd probably be Patrick Williams,
Yeah.
Wendell,
Thaddeus Young.
yeah, and Thad.
Thaddeus would slip into the four.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be their roster. And honestly, if I'm Chicago, I try to make this happen at all costs. I don't know if this is the best deal for Houston to accept because we got some juicy offers, but also some of those juicy offers might not ever be proposed by some of those teams because we know Boston, that would be a great deal. We're talking about how that could make them an instant contender, but there's also the human side of things, and they might not want to split that pairing of Brown and Tatum together because they have developed together for a long time. So potentially that trade's not on the table, and this might be one of the best offers Houston does end up getting.
Right.
Well, Laurie Markkinen is a great young player to
Mhm.
build your future around. I know Chicago was planning on doing it, but if they can get their hands on a player like James Harden to
Mhm.
win now with talent like Zach LaVine and Patrick Williams, who are a great young core, and Wendell Carter, who is supposed to be one of the premier young talented centers in the NBA, we
Mhm.
could potentially see this Chicago team, any team really, who gets James Harden contest in any conference he can go to because
Mhm.
what Houston built around James Harden this year isn't going to work. And James Harden knows that. That is why he's holding out of practice. That is why he is not showing up to their training camp. And he wants to get moved because he believes there are other options available to him that he can win. Chicago just might be one of them. And how historic will it be to play in a town where another great shooting guard, Michael Jordan, has set the legacy?
Who? No, I'm playing.
The one thing I would say though about this trade and what really intrigues me for Houston's side is the potential lineup of having Christian Wood and Laurie Markkinen on the floors together. Yes, they would also get the point guard in the future of Kobe White and
Mhm.
a good small forward to potentially start for you. I mean, to probably start for you and Otto Porter Jr.
Mhm.
Um, a good little 3-and-D guard. I feel like he's a little bit overlooked just because of how much he got overpaid by Washington.
Yeah.
Um,
That contract makes him look a lot worse than he is.
yeah. Especially since he's coming off the bench. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if this move does happen, you're adding you would add another guy that's able to stretch the floor who's 7 foot. I mean, yes, doesn't have the muscle like DeMarcus Cousins, so it isn't like a typical big man that you would probably still want on a roster. But having Christian Wood and Lauri Markkanen when Lauri's healthy could be like one of the.
Is that not the modern NBA front
That's
court that
pretty
we're
much
looking
a
at?
modern, yeah.
with John Wall.
That with
Mhm.
John Wall, you would still have guys like Eric Gordon, Daniel House.
PJ Tucker.
PJ Tucker. I mean, you have these guys. You have some guys that will
Dude,
be a factor, and you're also adding Kobe White and Otto Porter, who are two young assets.
that team reminds me of the Clippers, not last year, but the year before that, when they made some headway in the NBA.
Right.
When their best player was like Danilo Gallinari, and they just built a
Pat
really
Beverley.
deep team around that. Yeah, and Pat Beverly. They just built a really deep team around that with Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell coming off the bench and all that. That sounds very similar. It would be like John Wall is like the alpha dog, and then just a bunch of scrappy modern NBA players around that. If anyone has anything else to say, or we can move on to our fourth team.
Yeah, we can go ahead and move right along to Dallas, which is probably one of my favorite destinations for a player like James Harden, because when you look at it, who would he be playing alongside of? His quote unquote 2.0, Luka Doncic, who is in the MVP conversation for the next season, and quite frankly is one of the most impressive players to come out of overseas in quite some time. Luka Doncic is one of the most prolific basketball players in the NBA. When you pair him to such a similar player like James Harden, this team can have unlimited success. I'm talking about championships on championships. If you pair one of the best scorers in the league right now with one of the most up and coming prolific scorers who will lead the league in the future in scoring. I mean, Luka Doncic and a James Harden duo, you'd have to give up Kristaps Porzingis and Josh Richardson potentially in a deal. But moving on from KP to get James Harden isn't something that I see the Dallas Mavericks saying, whoa, this is impossible. I feel like this is something that they can actually do.
It's something they can do. I agree. It only makes their current weakness that much worse. It's their defense. Dallas already is one of those teams that's going to put up 120 points a game and give up 130. This might take that to another extreme. We might see point totals we've never seen before if a trade like this goes through, because neither Luka nor James Harden are very willing or capable defenders, and they would have no one else on the roster like Jay or Rich to do that job for them. That would be a really fun trade. That would be one of the most.
Josh Green. So that's another. That's a
Josh Green, one of my favorite prospects in the draft.
So it would be a really fun team to watch as long as Luka and James shared the wealth, because they are so similar. That would be an incredibly fun team to watch. They might struggle to win playoff games at first, but if they grew together for a year or two, I think they would be more than capable of reaching those high ceilings, like you said. And it would make sense for Houston because you're getting KP and Jay Rich back. That's a pretty good package. Maybe not quite as star-studded, in my opinion, as the Boston package, but pretty close to that level.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas, when you look at it, they have the potential to make a move because they do have Kristaps Porzingis, who does have a larger contract that can help them match James Harden's 41.2, I believe, $1 million deal. So when you look at it in the grander scheme of things, Kristaps Porzingis is another player like Lauri Markkanen almost that would provide something similar, maybe more of a star role on your team because he is more of a more known
Established
player. Yeah. So Kristaps could potentially be on the move here for James Harden. It's not impossible. I kind of like the deal for Houston a lot. And obviously Dallas, it's a no-brainer. Moving on to the next selection or the next team that could make the
And
deal.
this is the last one of our 5 teams that we think could trade for James Harden.
Yeah, the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, when you're talking about Memphis, the first thing you think of is Ja Morant. The guy is legendary. One vote off of winning unanimous Rookie of the Year, and he found out later on who that person was. But no, seriously, Ja Morant was one of the best rookies I have seen in the NBA in a long time. Provided a lot for that Memphis team and really helped them contest into making the borderline. Did they get into the play-in or no?
They made the play-in, and then they lost
Okay.
the first game, so they didn't make it to the second game.
This team is really one major piece away from contesting in the Western Conference. They have players on their team like Jonas Valanciunas, Justice Winslow, and few others that they can add to the
Jaren
package.
Jackson Jr.
Jaren Jackson and
That
Tyus
would be a
Jones
big piece.
would round out the cap space. So the trade package would look like this exactly: Jonas, Justice Winslow, Jaren Jackson, and Tyus Jones. That matches the cap for James Harden. What are your guys' thoughts on Memphis pulling the trigger on this deal and pairing a young Ja Morant with James Harden?
I think if you're Houston, this might be one of the best packages you can get. It's a really well-rounded package. There's some star talent. There's some veteran presence, some young prospects. This trade kind of has it all for Houston. For Memphis, though, you're really emptying the pot. Like, what's your team looking like? You have Ja Morant, James Harden, and
Dylan Brooks. You would start Goji Jang at center, and then maybe Kyle Anderson at the 4.
so this would be more of a long-term project for Memphis if they decided
Or
to do
Brandon
this.
Clark.
Yeah, this would be a long-term project for Memphis if they wanted to do this. They would have to really convince James Harden to get on board and not pull the same stunt a year later and sit out. It would be a hard task to do to build a contending team in 1 year around this roster. But it's an interesting trade. We're talking about it for a reason. On Houston's end, this is one that they're definitely going to consider if ever offered. But really hard to justify it on Memphis's end. Other than you just get a star player and worry about the rest after it happens.
I feel like the main goal, if Memphis were to do this trade, is to pair Ja Morant with James Harden and make that probably the best guard duo in the NBA. And we see some really good guard duos right now. Ja Morant is one of the most amazing young prospects in the league who is really going to develop into a nice young player and grow to be an all-star for years to come. It's going to be something that the Memphis Grizzlies are really happy to develop in their own franchise. But if you pair it with a player like James Harden, it is what I call an accelerating factor. Ja Morant is going to take that next step to become an all-star player and really develop. So with that being said, we covered all 5 teams that we could potentially see James Harden move on to, other than the Philadelphia and the Brooklyn Nets. So that's gonna cover the video for the most part. But let's go over which one of these packages is going to be our favorite package. Mine being the Sacramento Kings package, being Buddy Hield, Marvin Bagley, Jabari Parker, and Bjelica. I just feel like they're getting their bang for their buck, and they're doing what we think they would. If a team moves on from James Harden, they're probably going to tank for a year or two and then develop their young assets to potentially make a nice splash in a heavy Western Conference. That's why I feel like Buddy Hield is the player that they want to build off of.
Nice. Brandon?
I think for the best fit here, for Houston, I really would look for Chicago as being the best package, and it's kind of my favorite package for Houston. But if you're Harden, I would really think you would probably hope for Boston, because to be able to pair up with Kemba and Jason Tatum and in an already stacked lineup, even if you're giving up Brown, Smart, and Tyson Williams, like you'll still be able to have a good competitive lineup out there. With Chicago, it's a bit more of a project. I don't know how well it's going to fit with Zach LaVine. But if you're Houston, I would much rather have the Chicago option just for the future's sake.
And Sam?
So I'm looking at this from the perspective that James Harden is sitting out, and whatever team pulls the trigger and trades for him needs to be sure he won't do the same for them. And out of all these teams, the only team that I think can be safe about that is Boston. Boston can offer a deal like this, give out a lot of star talent, a lot of depth, and be sure that they are getting James Harden in return, not a guy that sits on the bench and pulls an Antonio Brown or something like what he did to the Raiders. He'll actually play games if they trade for him. So that's my favorite trade here because we are creating a championship contender right off the bat, and it's a deal that I think both teams would strongly consider if ever brought up in discussion. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, remember we have the Audible link in the description below. You can get a 30-day free trial, and check out our social medias for a very special giveaway as well. It's for the holiday season, so you better act quick to get a chance to win that one. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please sub to our YouTube channel and leave a like and comment in the description below what team you want to see James Harden traded to and what package you would do. Anyways, again, thank you guys so much for watching and for joining us today. Backseat Banner out.